Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a concept that really cuts to the quick of how we see each other, or maybe how we sometimes stop seeing each other fully.
Mm.
Dehumanization.
Mhm.
You, our listener, are here because you want to grasp complex ideas without getting lost in the weeds, and, well, that's exactly what we're about.
Absolutely.
We've got a fantastic resource, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's deep dive into dehumanization itself. And our mission today is to basically pull out the core insights.
Yeah, like how philosophers and psychologists break this idea down, or what sparks it, what it leads to.
And some of the surprising twists, right?
Yeah.
Prepare for those aha moments, but, without the information overload.
Exactly. And what's crucial as we start is understanding that dehumanization isn't just one simple thing. Our source highlights a few major ways people think about it.
Right.
So we'll be looking at the harms-based view that's really centered on how we treat others in ways that diminish their humanity.
Great trading.
Then we'll explore the psychological approach, which is more about the mental act, the thinking of someone as less than human.
Gotcha. Thought versus action. Kind of.
Sort of, yeah. And importantly, we'll see how these two aren't always totally separate. Some perspectives try to bridge that gap between thought and action.
Okay, so to get a handle on this, let's think about where these ideas even come from. It seems our understanding of dehumanization is, deeply tied to how we've defined being human over time.
Totally. The source points back to the Renaissance and Enlightenment,
Right.
a period that really boosted ideas like human dignity, natural rights, freedom, equality, based on our capacity for reason and self-governance.
So it makes sense then if you deny someone those rights or that dignity, that's seen as a core form of dehumanization.
Precisely. But what's fascinating is how those philosophical ideals then bumped up against later scientific stuff.
Like Darwin.
Yeah. While Darwin's theories were revolutionary for biology, they were also, unfortunately, twisted to support some really awful pseudoscientific ideas.
You mean scientific racism?
Exactly. Falsely claiming certain groups were biologically inferior, less evolved, basically less human. It's a dark chapter, but it really shows the messy, multifaceted nature of this whole concept.
And how interdisciplinary it is now.
Yeah.
Philosophy, psychology.
Sociology, history, all trying to unpack it.
And it's not like this is a settled issue, is it? The source mentions different sort of waves of thinking.
Right. There was an initial wave, late 20th century psychology, often looking at extreme violence like genocide.
Oh.
Then early 2000s, this new look came along, shifting more towards lab studies, subtle stuff, maybe implicit biases.
Everyday dehumanization, almost.
Yeah, maybe. And meanwhile, philosophy was wrestling with it too. Mid-20th century, you had thinkers like Arndt looking at war, genocide, totalitarianism.
And then figures like de Beauvoir, Dworkin, McKinnon, Nussbaum, bringing in the crucial perspective on gender oppression and how dehumanization works there.
Vital work, absolutely. So, you see, it's got this rich, evolving history.
Okay, so let's dive deeper into those main approaches you mentioned, starting with the harms-based one.
Let's do it. So, the core idea here, again, isn't primarily about your thoughts, but about your actions. It's about treating someone in a way that actually damages or diminishes their humanity.
Right. And even within that, there are different flavors, aren't there? The source mentions feminist thinkers like McKinnon and Dworkin.
Yes, they connect dehumanization specifically to undermining core human capacities. Things like autonomy, our ability to choose, and subjectivity, our inner life, our perspective.
So if you treat someone like they lack those things,
You're essentially reducing them to a thing or commodity. You're harming their social standing as a full human being.
that makes sense. And Nussbaum builds on this.
She does, yeah. She makes this really useful distinction between acceptable and unacceptable objectification.
Okay. So not all objectification is bad.
According to her, no. It's when you treat someone as an object without also respecting their fundamental humanity, that's when it crosses into dehumanization.
And she lists ways this happens, like instrumentality.
Exactly. Using them purely as a tool, also denying their autonomy, treating them as inert or interchangeable fungibility, seeing them as violable, ownable, denying their inner experience.
Wow, quite a list.
And later, her humanist feminism shifted focus slightly, talking about inhibiting capacities for truly human functioning. Things like bodily integrity, health, practical reason, emotions, forming relationships.
So the core isn't just using someone, but the complete disregard for their human qualities while doing so.
That's the idea. Then you have Mikkola's view, which frames dehumanization as an indefensible setback to really core, legitimate human interests.
Right.
Like being able to plan your life, wanting to continue living, needing friendships, things most people share.
And damaging those is a moral injury.
Yes, because it damages the recognition of that person's value. Mikula argues even a small lie might be wrong, but not necessarily dehumanizing unless it hits these fundamental interests.
Interesting distinction. And Kilmister's take is different again, more social.
Very much so. Kilmister sees dehumanization as trying to kick someone out of the socially constructed category of human.
Socially constructed.
Okay. Yeah, he says our idea of who counts is built on rules. Constitutive rules, like being Homo sapiens, deontological rules, human rights, norms of treatment, like death rituals, and our shared social imaginary, our background understanding.
And dehumanization attacks these rules.
In 3 ways, he suggests. Constitutive dehumanization challenges who even counts biologically or fundamentally. Corrosive dehumanization questions if the rules and norms apply to certain groups. And hermeneutic dehumanization is when the social imaginary itself just doesn't allow for certain ways of being human for some people.
So it's like dismantling the very social framework that defines humanity for certain groups.
Yeah.
That's quite a powerful idea. But this harms-based approach isn't without critics, right?
Definitely not. Smith, for instance, argues it struggles to separate dehumanization itself from its harmful effects because the definition includes the harm.
It kind of blends them together.
Right. And then there are anti-essentialists who say, hey, humans are diverse, you can't pin down fixed essential capacities.
Good point.
Though proponents push back, Nussbaum might say these capacities are normative, what we value as human. Mikula focuses on widely shared traits, not necessarily universal ones.
Okay.
And finally, some thinkers, like sentientists or post-humanists, argue that mistreatment is wrong because it harms interests or causes suffering, regardless of whether you call it diminishing humanity.
Right. The focus shifts from humanity to sentience or interests. Okay, that's a good overview of the harms-based side. Let's switch to the psychological approach. This is about the thinking, right? Seeing someone as less than human.
Exactly. And this broad approach seems to split into 2 main types, categorical and graded.
Categorical versus graded. What's the difference?
Categorical is about mentally putting someone completely outside the human box. Graded is more like seeing them as lower down on a scale of humanness.
Okay, like not human at all versus less human. Let's start with categorical.
Right. Smith's subhumanization theory is key here. He suggests it involves genuinely believing a group has a subhuman essence.
An essence.
Yeah, and it's not a spectrum, you either have it or you don't. It's seen as inherited, fixed, and it justifies generalizing about the whole group.
That sounds absolute.
It is, and Smith points out this weird cognitive dissonance. The dehumanizer sees the person looks human, but believes they have this subhuman essence. He thinks this contradiction can create a disturbing feeling of uncanniness.
Wow. Recognizing and denying at the same time. That's unsettling. And what about ambiguity theories?
These suggest dehumanizers might say, okay, biologically human, but deny humanness in some other non-biological way.
Like a metaphorical not human.
Kind of. Steisinger's analysis of Nazi ideology is a chilling example.
Yeah.
They saw Jews as biologically human, but metaphysically non-human, lacking a race soul or culture-creating ability.
So different kinds of human.
Exactly. Phillips talks about descriptive versus normative humanness. Descriptive is just being Homo sapiens. Normative, being a true or real human, means having certain moral qualities.
Ah, so you could see a serial killer as biologically human, but not a true human.
That's Phillips's idea. And Druder connects this to moral concern. Denying non-biological humanness means their experiences don't count ethically against mistreating them. You put them outside moral consideration.
It's like saying, yeah, human body, but not the qualities that matter morally. Okay, now let's shift to graded dehumanization. This is big in social psychology.
Huge. Infrahumanization theory from Lyons and others suggests we see outgroups as lacking a full human essence by denying them uniquely human secondary emotions.
Secondary emotions like
Guilt, shame, nostalgia, things seen as more complex than primary emotions like fear or joy, which we might think animals share.
interesting. So you see them as emotionally simpler.
In a way, yeah. The dual model builds on this, distinguishing animalistic dehumanization, seeing people as lacking reason, civility, like animals, and mechanistic dehumanization, seeing them as lacking warmth, agency, individuality, like machines or objects.
So either reducing them to beasts or robots,
Yeah.
neither fully human. What about the mind perception thesis?
Right. Gray, Epley, and others focus on denying mental capacities along 2 lines: agency, planning, acting intentionally, and experience, feeling sensations, emotions,
So seeing someone as low in either planning or feeling.
or both, yeah. That's seen as dehumanization. And then there's the stereotype content model from Fisk's group.
That's the warmth and competence one, right?
Exactly. Initially, they thought only low warmth, low competence groups, like the homeless in their studies, were truly dehumanized, showing less activity in brain areas for social thought.
But they refined that.
Yeah, later work identified 3 types: animalistic, disgust for low groups; mechanistic, envy for high competence, low warmth groups; and even a pitying dehumanization for warm but incompetent groups, like the elderly or some disabled people.
Pitying dehumanization.
Yeah.
So even seemingly positive stereotypes can be involved. And it's not just thinking, but perception too.
Right, perceptual dehumanization, how we actually see people. Fincher and Tetlock found we process criminals' faces less holistically, more feature by feature, making them look less human.
Wow.
Vase and others found objectified women were processed visually, more like inanimate objects, like dolls. Varga talks about perceiving a lack of animacy or mentality.
So our eyes can play tricks based on our biases,
Yeah.
and then implicit dehumanization. Unconscious stuff.
Exactly. Unconscious associations. Studies have shown implicit links between Black people and apes, for instance, or associating those secondary emotions more strongly with your own group.
And implicit can mean how it's measured or the unconscious state itself.
Correct. It can refer to indirect measurement methods like reaction times, or the idea that the bias itself operates outside conscious awareness.
Okay, that's a really broad spectrum under the psychological umbrella.
Yeah.
And measuring all this, it must be complex.
It is. You've got implicit versus explicit measures and subtle versus blatant ones.
Like that ascent of man scale. That seems pretty blatant.
Kay Tiley's scale, yeah. Asking people to rate groups on an evolutionary chart from ape to human. Very explicit, very blatant.
Versus subtle.
Like the infrahumanization studies asking about emotions, they don't directly say rate their humanity, but they're designed to get at those underlying biases.
And these distinctions, implicit, explicit, subtle, blatant, they overlap.
They're often seen as independent dimensions, more like spectrums than neat boxes.
But these measures aren't universally accepted, are they? There are critiques.
Oh, definitely. Enoch and colleagues argued some measures, like for infrahumanization or the dual model, might just be picking up general negative bias towards outgroups, not specifically about uniquely human traits.
Just general negativity, not specific dehumanization.
That's their argument. Though others, like Vase, have defended the measures. There were also ethical worries about scales like the ascent scale potentially increasing dehumanization, but one study found no evidence for that.
Okay, so ongoing debates about measurement. And the whole psychological approach has faced broader critiques, too.
It has. Smith, again, criticizes the main social psych models for not explaining blatant cases well, like Nazi anti-Semitism, where Jews were often seen as cunning, not just animalistic or robotic.
Right, doesn't fit the low competence mold.
He also thinks they neglect demonic dehumanization and wrongly assume it's graded, not categorical. Others, like Over and Bloom, worry it gets conflated with just any negative attitude.
And maybe the biggest critique.
Is that in many key historical cases, the Holocaust, misogyny victims were attacked because they were seen as human, but as dangerous, threatening, morally flawed humans, not necessarily as non-human.
Which brings us right to that paradox of dehumanization. Perpetrators attributing human traits to victims. How do theorists try to resolve that?
Well, one way, as we just heard from Appia, Lang, Bloom, is to say the psychological models just don't explain these cases well. Maybe the dehumanizing language is metaphorical for negative ideas about humans.
Like calling someone an animal is just a strong insult, not a literal belief.
That's one interpretation. Another, from Smith, is the contradictory beliefs ideological subhuman essence versus perceptual human recognition, leading to that uncanniness. He also talks about demonizing versus enfeebling dehumanization based on perceived threat level.
So a clash between ideology and perception.
Then you have the ambiguity theorists. Maybe perpetrators use multiple concepts of human. Biologically human, but not metaphysically, or not a true human morally, or lacking moral standing.
Acknowledging one kind of humanity while denying another.
Exactly. Or, another idea, affirming some human traits, like intelligence, while denying others, like morality or complex emotion. Cayley and Landry talk about a platonic ideal human and judging groups based on their perceived distance from that ideal.
Like failing to meet the ideal human standard on key traits.
Right. And finally, pluralists like Nussbaum or Kronfeldner try to resolve it by combining approaches. Nussbaum suggests you can engage in dehumanizing treatment even while kind of knowing the victim is human.
Action over belief, in a way.
And Kronfeldner, with his different forms, levels, and senses of human, argues the paradox is a mirage. You might dehumanize someone behaviorally while still seeing them as human cognitively in other senses. It's not necessarily contradictory if you see dehumanization as multi-layered.
So the paradox might just show how complex the concept really is. Okay, let's move to the why and what happens next, the explanations and consequences.
Yeah, and it's useful here to think about proximal versus ultimate explanations. Proximal is the immediate triggers, ultimate is the deeper why it exists.
Okay, so ultimate explanations first, psychologically speaking.
A big one is psychological equanimity, making it easier to harm others by overcoming inhibitions. Smith's Himmler example, minimizing contact with victims.
To reduce seeing them as individuals.
Chilling, or rationalizing violence after the fact, coping with your own actions. Others suggest it helps cope with mortality salience or minimizes the emotional cost of empathy. And of course, the power of dehumanizing ideologies.
Creating a worldview where it makes sense, and from the harms-based side.
Ultimate explanations there often focus on maintaining power structures, oppressive relationships. Mikola McKinnon talk about reinforcing hierarchies, controlling desire.
Okay, and the immediate proximal triggers.
Psychologically, things like personality traits, narcissism, nationalism, authoritarianism, social dominance orientation.
So some people are more prone to it.
Seems so. But also, transient states matter, feeling disgusted, feeling threatened. Meta-dehumanization, believing they dehumanize you, can trigger it too.
A vicious cycle.
Yeah. And underlying beliefs about humanness matter is it an essence, tied to morality. Is human superiority over animals a core belief? Plus, the immediate context, propaganda, derogatory language, all proximal triggers.
And from the harms-based view, proximal causes.
Things like pornography have been discussed as a potential cause of objectifying dehumanization, though that's debated.
So a mix of personality, situation, beliefs, and culture. What about the consequences?
They're severe. Psychologically, it can lead to seeing the victim as lacking moral standing, making mistreatment seem acceptable, though not everyone agrees it's that direct.
But it's linked to violence.
Strongly. Seen as a catalyst for genocide. Lab studies link it to aggression, vengeance, harsher sentences, less willingness to help or rehabilitate, even sexual harassment.
It seems to erode basic empathy and moral concern.
Though some argue the link to hostility is complex, context-dependent, and Rye et al. Found it increased instrumental violence more than moral violence in their study, but that used a specific model. Other studies differ.
And harms-based consequences.
Perpetuating hierarchy, oppression, control, shaping people's preferences, making rebellion harder.
It's a tool for maintaining unjust systems.
Yeah.
The source also looks at specific contexts, like genocide and war.
Absolutely. Seen as crucial for enabling and sustaining mass violence, gaining civilian support. Though, again, some debate its exact role versus other factors.
Race and ethnicity.
Outgroups are vulnerable, linked to things like less support for immigration. Smith links this to racialization and essentialism.
Slavery and colonialism seem like prime examples.
Definitely. Ideologies legitimizing it often relied heavily on dehumanizing the enslaved or colonized. Think Aristotle on natural slaves, Sepulveda. Though the paradox appears here too, sometimes acknowledging certain human capacities while still brutally oppressing.
And the justice system.
Concerns about policing, punishment severity, linking dehumanization to harsher retribution. How we perceive prisoners impacts views on rehabilitation. Solitary confinement is often debated as inherently dehumanizing.
It seems embedded in systems of control. What about sex, gender, disability?
Central to gender oppression, often via sexual objectification from a harms-based view. Or undermining women's goals, as Mikola argues. Social psych looks at attitudes towards LGBTQ+ folks.
And disability.
Eugenics relied on dehumanization, demonizing, or enfeebling. Historical animalization or vegetation metaphors. Philosophical debates about moral status have been critiqued by disability scholars, and psych studies show biases. Even medicine isn't immune concerns about patient dehumanization.
It's really everywhere there's power difference or perceived otherness. Okay, quickly, the relationship between dehumanization and objectification, they seem linked, but maybe not the same.
Exactly. Different models exist. Some feminist views see them as equivalent. Some psych models see objectification as one type of dehumanization, like mechanistic. Nussbaum sees dehumanization as one type of objectification, the impermissible kind.
So which one contains the other? Or do they just overlap?
Overlap is another possibility, or they could be distinct. Smith argues dehumanization is thought, objectification is treatment, though they often cause each other. It's still being debated.
Okay. And finally, what are the big remaining challenges or issues here?
One is scope, not letting dehumanization become meaningless by applying it to everything negative. Need clarity, distinguishing it from other biases or harm.
Avoid overuse.
Right. Another is the sheer number of models and measures in psych. Are they measuring the same thing? Different facets or totally different concepts?
Getting the theory straight.
And finally, needing to better integrate the broader context ideologies, social structures, institutions, especially in psychological models, which often focus heavily on the individual.
Moving beyond just individual minds. Wow. This has been incredibly rich and honestly quite sobering.
It is heavy stuff.
We've really unpacked the dual nature, thinking versus acting, the different forms, the debates about causes, consequences, its reach across so many areas. Hopefully, listeners, you feel you've got a clearer, more nuanced grasp now without being totally swamped.
Absolutely. And thinking about those different senses of being human, we discussed group membership, having certain properties, having moral standing, it really makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Which of those is most often attacked, most dangerously eroded when dehumanization happens today? Which sense of human is the main target? It's something to really chew on.
That is a powerful closing thought. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really encourage you to ponder that question. And please, let us know what other complex ideas you'd like us to unpack next time on the Deep Dive.